Well, the regions adopted a plan that complies with the requirement in the Budget Act. So we are basing the release of the funds based on that requirement. The university has the flexibility to decide how to structure a program to meet the expectation and to manage operations to meet the state's expectations and priorities.
Okay. Not sure I understand what you just said nor agree with that, but yeah. Yeah. Maybe you take a chance. Ms. Kim, you want to ask the question again?
No, it's the same question the legislature intended. Last year when we discussed this issue, we specifically asked that, you consider using the state cap just specifically to have some savings and not to use that savings for something else. I mean, you just stated that UCs have your own discretionary decision to decide how you want to spend that money, but that wasn't the intent of our legislature when we discussed it last year. So same question, same concern. I just don't know if we are satisfied.
Okay. University of California, do you want to maybe elaborate how you feel that this action basically coincides with the direction of the legislature and the governor to do this pension cap, to save the money, to focus on other UC priorities? I mean, because we always hear that, look, we'd like to enroll more students. California, you're not giving enough money. We have to go raise out-of-state revenue and enrollment numbers to make that happen. And so here we thought was an opportunity, granted many years down the road, but you're eating away those potential savings by having this secondary sweetener for executives. So how does that match the intent that we put forward last year?
Well, there's many different ways to look at it, and we certainly think that we did meet the intent by adopting the cap on pensionable earnings in our pension plan. And, that, along with the money from the state, the Prop 2 money, over time will reduce the unfunded liability in the pension plan. And that was really the focus, bending the long-term cost curve of our unfunded liability. So that additional money from the state will help, and then having a lower cost tier, if you hold the employer cost constant, then over time, more and more of the total contribution will go towards the unfunded liability. And of the cost reduction that we experience, more than half of that is being designated towards the unfunded liability.
But why not stop there? Why not just say, okay, cap, $50 million, bank away to the future? Why do the secondary piece when the savings is now only $9 million?
Right. Well, the university community
is it because the professors and administrators would say that's not enough? We'll go somewhere else and teach.
The president felt that she absolutely wanted to comply with the budget agreement, obviously, and to put in the cap. But she also wanted to look at, if we're going to make that big of a change to our pension, to cap the pension at 117, and it is substantial for 20% of our workforce, 80% under the cap, 20% above. But if we were going to do that, she wanted to look at it more broadly. She wanted to look at all of our workforce segments, to look at UC Health and LBL and our younger, more mobile workforce. Rather than just putting in a cap, let's look at our whole program. Are there other changes that we should make?
Well, those are two issues, and I realize that's another issue, which is a debate we could spend hours on. But the issue for our budget committee is that this is what makes our constituents so crazy, is that they're getting squeezed out of the UC system. They're getting letters right now saying, sorry, we can't go there. And then they see that the university agrees to this change and then has this secondary backdoor and sweetener enhancement on top of their salaries. And in the eyes of competitiveness or making it work for everybody, but it doesn't add up as far as long-term cost savings.
Well, I can understand how it appears, but the university community and the academic senate felt strongly to maintain the quality of our faculty and to be able to recruit and retain our faculty. They felt strongly that an additional element of the pension was necessary to continue to recruit top faculty. The administrators, that was mentioned earlier, the staff, they're not in that designation to get that faculty benefit. They're getting a lesser benefit. And the university community, in the course of the task force work and in all of the comments that were received on the website and the letters the president got, there was overwhelming concern about faculty recruitment and retention. And the administration felt very strongly that they needed to do something about that to maintain a competitive advantage, that the 117 alone wasn't going to cut it to be able to recruit the faculty that we need in our organization. That's really the bottom line.
Okay. Thank you. Assemblymember Irwin.
And we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but to me, the biggest issue with pensions is that they have to stay sustainable, viable, and that we don't, every time we have an economic downturn, go back and ask the taxpayers for additional money to deal with these unfunded liabilities. It seems that when you create this second opportunity for savings, you're taking away, I mean, you've acknowledged that, all the high-paying administrators that come in for a couple of years and leave, and some of the young people who I have no idea why they would go for this option, because everybody should be really happy with retirement security. So are you making, with this decision, the pension less viable, less sustainable? Because that's my main criteria.
Right.
Are you making this less sustainable? We don't want to go back to the taxpayers and ask for additional money because you've added this second supplemental benefit and to deal with the administrators that you're trying to retain. I mean, it's almost more honest just to give additional salary or something like that, as opposed to potentially creating an unsustainable pension.
Right. Well, additional salaries have increased costs too, so that's a factor that we, have with our recruitments. But we partnered with our region's independent consulting actuary, Siegel Consulting, and they did do long-term modeling of how our plan's unfunded liability would look with this DC choice option, assuming an 80% pension take rate and a 20% DC choice take rate. And, the default is the pension again. So you have to affirmatively elect to be in that DC choice. And what we wanted to make sure that we did was that there's a unfunded liability contribution on the pension side, and there's the same unfunded liability on the DC side for those that elect that option. So the departments that have employees that elect this DC choice option, there's an 8% employer contribution. We're also going to assess that department 6% on that person on their salary and put that money into UCRP for the unfunded liability. So John can quickly talk about the study that they did, but it shows that there is no material impact based on those assumptions on UCRP or its unfunded liability or its ability to pay pension benefits.
But the assumption is that it's the highest paid employees that are going to opt out?
Not necessarily, no, because the faculty are a cohort that is more highly paid than most other groups, and they feel traditionally that a pension is best for them because they plan on having a longer career at the university than perhaps other employee groups, and we fully expect them to pick the pension. And we tried to make up for the reduction in the pension value as far as replacement income by adding the supplemental benefit. And to build up over time, it has to be really from $1, not in the future when they might cross that threshold. We believe, and we've talked to other employers and other retirement plans in the country that have choice, and the most prevalent set of retirement options for our comparator 26 is a choice between a DB and a DC. 10 of them have that. And when we talk with other plans, like at Ohio PERS and Ohio STRS, less than 10% of their employees elect a DC. Pension is still the predominant vehicle, but we wanted to have options for recruitment, especially for our cohort of a younger, more mobile workforce that doesn't plan on working for the university for 30 years or 25 years or 20 years. They're going to be here for a year or 2, 3 years, and they're going to take another job. We might be able to recruit them more easily if they had an option for retirement that had some value to them, because there's losers in a defined benefit plan. If you don't stay 5 years, you only get your own contributions back. If you're in a DC environment, you can take the employer contributions and your own and roll them over and build up your retirement readiness over time. It's just another tool for us for recruitment.
Thank you. I think we will have a different perspective when we adopt the final budget and add some conditions to the $96 million in Prop 2 funds. Okay. Any follow-up questions to this? Okay. Next item, issue number 4. Excuse me. issue number 4. Student outreach and student academic preparation, not probation, excuse me, student academic preparation and educational partnerships. Hi, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. A very important but sometimes overlooked topic in the university. We wanted to revisit this issue and talk about ways we can increase the composition of our university to reflect California. So if you can begin, Ms. Goulet.
Chair McCarthy and members of the committee, my name is Yvette Goulet. I am the Vice Provost for Diversity for the University of California. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you today about UC's academic preparation programs, as well as our newer outreach efforts to support diversifying UC's student population. I also want to thank you for your past support in helping us sustain the funding for these important programs. The university's academic preparation and outreach programs represent a significant contribution to advance the university toward engaging the full range of California's diverse people to become the innovators and leaders that our state needs. Today, I'm going to provide an overview of our longstanding programs and some of their outcomes, and describe to you our more recent efforts to address diversity at the University of California. UC's Student Academic Preparation and Educational Partnerships portfolio, what we call SAPEP, is a collection of about 13 programs that prepare students academically to enter four-year colleges directly from high school or as transfer students. They contribute to raising overall K-12 student achievement. They help us address barriers to educational equity, and they increase the diversity of our graduate and professional school enrollment. They serve the state's first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students and the schools they attend. The portfolio includes 4 types of interventions: student academic preparation programs like EAOP, MESA, Puente, and Transfer Prep, school and community partnerships, undergraduate, graduate, and educator preparation programs, and online courses and technology-assisted services. Collectively, more than 1,000 K-12 institutions are served by our programs, and more than 200,000 students are impacted in K-12 schools, community colleges, and on our UC campuses. I'll briefly describe some of our largest programs. The Early Academic Outreach Program, also known as EAOP, focuses on A through G course access and success, college entrance exams, and UC eligibility. The Mathematics, Engineering, Science Achievement Program, or MESA, helps to raise the number of students who enter college with well-developed math and science skills. Our Puente project helps students develop college preparatory English skills. We administer MESA and Puente in collaboration with the other sectors, and in particular the California community colleges. UC Scout is an online program that provides college preparation, honors, and advanced placement courses, as well as credit recovery courses to thousands of high school students, and is available to every school in California. Also available to every California high school is the Transcript Evaluation Service that provides a student and school-level assessment of access to and achievement in A through G courses. For students in community colleges, we offer Transfer Prep to provide our prospective transfer students with everything they need for a smooth transition into the UC system. To help diversify the graduate pipeline, we include graduate and professional school programs that prepare our high-achieving, first-generation, low-income UC undergraduates to become the next generation of academics, researchers, practitioners, and leaders. So there are quite a few programs in SAPEP, but what about results? We will always have plenty of anecdotal and amazing, against all odds, personal stories of student success. We also conduct studies, evaluations, and annual assessments of our programs to make sure they're achieving the goals that are in place for them. Our accountability work is guided by an accountability framework that was developed by the university in partnership with the state. And with this framework as a tool, we're able to quantitatively measure the success of the programs and whether they are improving students' chances of getting into college and succeeding. And the data show that SAPEP programs serve the students and schools that need them most. Of the high schools served by UC's programs, 70% are among the lowest performing schools in the state. SAPEP participants have higher rates of academic achievement, college readiness, and college enrollment. 76% of our participants complete A through G requirements, compared to 39% of their peers. And our yield to application rate, the students who are admitted to the university and enroll, are higher for SAPEP participants than for similar students from similar schools. So in other words, early and frequent engagement with UC that students experience through a SAPEP program pays off in yield. We've expanded that strategy of early and frequent engagement into new programs to fill information gaps about UC in schools and communities where we can't always reach them. Under President Napolitano's leadership, our Achieve UC program brings leaders such as the President into our schools and communities to inspire students to see themselves as college material and to prepare for the university. We have also taken the additional step to identify high-performing students from low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented backgrounds who can benefit from more contact with UC. They are President's pre-college scholars. UC has high-quality programs and strong outcomes. SAPEP programs help demystify the university and help more students prepare for UC. But our resources are limited, and the limitations of our reach have had impact on some groups, in particular African Americans. Despite our outstanding programs, too few high-achieving African American students are enrolling at UC. So to better understand why these students are choosing other options for college and what we can do to address it, we commissioned a research study to identify the institutional policies, the practices, and the other issues that may impede the admission to and the enrollment of African American students. And this study provided short, medium, and long-term actions for UC, for admissions, for outreach, for high school support, for financial aid and affordability, and for leadership, the infrastructure on our campuses, to support the enrollment and persistence for African American students. We are actively working to implement the recommendations where they're feasible, and in the short term, we have enhanced our yield efforts this spring to increase the number of underrepresented students, and particularly African American students, who enroll at the university. One finding of the study is that African American students are often unable to visit campuses to which they're admitted due to costs of travel or distance. And as a result, they're not able to experience what attending one of our campuses might be like for them and the ways that the university community can support their academic and their social lives. So we took aggressive measures this spring to change that for fall 2016. 1,000 additional admitted students were invited to visit every campus to which they were admitted, stay overnight in our residence halls, meet our students and our faculty, and have their questions answered before they make their final decision on May 1st. And we're still sorting through our statement of intents to register for the fall, but by all indications, this strategy has actually worked, and we will see a higher number of African American students and other students on our campuses. So in closing, our SAPEP programs quite literally open doors and change lives. And through these programs, UC supports those who live here, to thrive here, and to lead here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with some commentary and some questions. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that after the passage of Prop 209 and the SP1 measure in the 90s, that UC, of course, saw a precipitous decline in underrepresented students and took this issue seriously and tried to work on some solutions to rectify the issue. And when I had a chance to sit in this seat 20 years ago with then UC budget director, maybe she's watching on TV today or the internet, Deborah Obley, we worked to start this effort. And certainly with the recession, we saw some of those programs go away. And we have seen an increase in underrepresented enrollment at UC, but in large part, we've seen the population of California high school students increase dramatically, especially Latino students. African Americans, of course, have remained, and Native Americans about the same. And so I guess the question going forward is, unfortunately, in the high, we were spending, what was it, 80-something million a year on these programs, and now it's, what is it here? It's 24, of which 12 is general fund and 12 are university funds. And so, going forward, we've been able to, I assume, take a look at which ones, paid the most dividends. And I guess my question to the university is if you had the opportunity to expand, if there was more resources on the table, which of these programs do you think would pay be most beneficial in the short term? Especially, I was really struck by the reports that you mentioned. I read the summary, and I think Ed Source or the LA Times something last week, and a lot of the students that you talked about, they never heard from a UC recruiter or campus individual or faculty or what have you, whether it's the EOP or other programs. So what can we be doing, to get those students who are basically eligible? They could go, they're not going. There are other issues. There's campus climate, financial aid that they may pay a factor as well. But what do you recommend that we could do if we had more resources?
Sure, and thank you for that question. As you know, the university's budget has declined precipitously for the SAPEP programs. We now have about 30 cents for every dollar we had in the early 2000s. One of the efforts that we've reduced over the years as we've refined the portfolio to come into alignment with the resources is informational outreach and recruitment. It's one of the things that we no longer are funded to do. And so I think in the short term, what we would want to reinvest in is filling the information gaps in the state with respect to awareness about UC, with the right preparation that students need, with the guidance that students need and really do require to reach the doors of UC.
So how would we do that? Under which programs? If you look, you have our agenda right there?
I do.
On page 15, we're at the table, which kind of lists, and maybe it's not necessarily reflected here in this table, but if it is, if you could, point to which of the programs do you think that we should pay more attention to?
It's reflected in two parts of the agenda. So on page 15, our direct student services programs are really the ones that lead the students to the door of UC. And those are ones that we want to continue to sustain and increase our investment in. Mm-hmm. But if you look down at the footnote, number 4, the programs we've eliminated also have import. The ability for students to prepare for SAT and ACT and to have those fees waived and to have the kind of preparation and practice they need. Informational outreach and recruitment are two of the areas where we think that our disinvestment has had an unintentional impact on our populations. So those two areas, direct student support as well as reviving our efforts to do test preparation to make more students achieve UC eligibility and to do the information awareness and recruitment that was noted as lacking in the study you referenced.
So you would revive more of the programs that are included in the footnote number 4 as opposed to increase some of the direct student services at the top?
No, both.
Both?
Both.
Of the direct student services, which ones, or all of them?
Well, all of them are direct student services. They're the ones.
But which ones would you increase if you had money available at your disposal?
We would look at our largest students programs, EAOP, Mesa, Puente, and Transfer Prep, as the ones that are working directly in high schools and community colleges with the students that we want to see on our campuses, as well as the work that our undergraduates do. In schools, undergraduates are able to reach populations that sometimes the professional staff can't reach, and they mentor and support some of the neediest students. And our graduate and professional school programs, which increase our pipeline to the faculty, are also worthy of additional investment.
Okay. And I know the university has been putting more of your own money into the pot since the recession in 08. 09, probably the year before. Has there been, and this probably isn't a question for you, but maybe Kieran or the UC, has there been a discussion to look at existing programs in the university and maybe redirect those resources into this effort?
Other university programs outside of SAPEP?
Yeah.
I would defer to Kieran for that.
And maybe we can get to that in the next panel, Kieran. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for educating the committee and reminding us about this important work. And it's my hope that we can rebuild your efforts.
Thank you.
You can come back with some even stronger numbers. Thank you. Okay. Next item. This is a catch-all other UC programs, and we're going to bring up the auditor's office, the LAO, the UC, and Department of Finance. And this is somewhat a difficult term to understand, but essentially this leads to the intro comments an hour and a half ago, and just right here during this comment is that there are a lot of great programs the UC does out there. Some were embedded in the budgets over the years. Some we know about. We don't have a line item anymore for all these pieces, but we think it's time to take a look at some of these programs and have really a tough love discussion as far as, are these programs needed in the reality of 2016 going forward, or should we look at redirecting some of the funds from these to other efforts in the UC, like student academic preparation and outreach, and student enrollment, and student services. So with that, we want to allow our state auditor's office to begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Kathleen Fullerton from the State Auditor's Office. We released our audit in March. The main conclusion of the audit was that the UC's decisions have adversely impacted California resident students. And we came to that conclusion in part because we believe the university could have made different decisions with its own financial resources, which may have mitigated some of these adverse impacts on residents. In particular, on page 20 of your agenda, it's called Table 17, we highlight 18 different programs for which the university spends a significant amount of state funds every year. It's about $337 million. And these are different programs that were at one point established in a budget, but have since been removed. They no longer have specific earmarks. However, the university did not take advantage of this additional financial flexibility that it was given and continues to fund these programs using state funds, and in many cases continues to give them annual cost adjustments. The university itself established a committee in 2011-12, which was tasked with evaluating some of these programs, and the report itself did identify two particular programs for which the university may be able to find alternative sources of funds to pay for. That's the California HIV and AIDS Research Program, which in 14-15 used about $8.8 million in state funds. The report also identified that the Mind Institute, which receives about $3.8 million in state funds, could potentially be funded from other sources. In addition, the Chief Financial Officer, Nathan Brostrom, told us during the course of the audit that the neuropsychiatric institutes, which receive about $33 million a year, could also be funded from other sources of funds. So those three programs alone sum to about $45 million just in 2014-15. So if you use the number that the university asserts it costs to educate a resident student using the state funds, it's about $10,000 per student. So essentially that $45 million could have equated to about 4,500 additional resident spots if that money was used for that purpose. Our concern with these programs was that the university doesn't regularly monitor them or analyze them, determine whether they have a continued benefit to the university's mission, or whether they're appropriately funded with state funds. We made several recommendations to the university related to these programs that are highlighted in your agenda as well. One is that they track their spending more carefully for them, that they reevaluate these programs on an annual basis, and that they explore whether there are alternative revenue sources for these particular programs. In its response, the university stated that it would not implement this recommendation. So that concludes my comments. I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you. LAO?
Jason Constanturos, LAO. We were asked to compile a list of line items in UC's budget that the state had provided in past years, over the past few decades. And we were asked today to provide just a high-level and brief overview of those line items. That's what I'll do. And you can see the list of those line items on page 21 in your agenda. Just one thing to note, we compiled these line items based on old budget summaries, and so a lot of these line items may not exist anymore. They existed at one time. and they don't necessarily reflect all of the programs at UC, just the ones that the state identified in the Budget Act. So as I stated earlier, the budget process really is one of the few ways that the legislature can express its priorities for UC, in part because of UC's constitutional autonomy. In the past few years, the state has approached UC budgeting by providing a broad, flexible support budget, and then either within that or sometimes in addition to that, identify key programs that it would like to specifically allocate state funding to. Sometimes these programs were part of the core academic mission of UC. For example, an enrollment target would be an example of that, or financial aid. But very often these earmarks focused on UC's other two missions, research and public service. In addition, the earmarks tended to focus very specifically on individual programs. For example, there were a few programs that were joint programs held with other higher education institutions. Very often these line items weren't reviewed in the state budget. Once they were in there, they frequently weren't updated to reflect inflation, or they weren't necessarily reviewed for need. For example, the financial aid item began a few decades ago when UC wasn't providing much financial aid. But in later years, UC began providing more institutional aid. The state began to increase the amount of funding it was providing in Cal Grants and other financial aid. And so that financial aid item within UC, which is tens of millions of dollars, wasn't a huge component of state financial aid programs anymore. But that wasn't regularly reviewed and remained in the budget through 2012-13. In recent years, a lot of these line items were removed from the budget, and in recent years, the state has been a lot less prescriptive with UC budgeting. It's provided a general support item, and UC's had a lot of flexibility. A lot of these programs are now funded through a UC support item, as the auditor just mentioned, or as someone from the auditor's office just mentioned. So because of that, we haven't provided any more recent analyses of these programs.